Hi guys, let's go and check out 10 most embarrassing Stephanie McMahon moments on WWE TV.
Stephanie McMahon's most embarrassing moments in WWE. Triple H exposes his wife. When Triple H made a heroic return from injury in early 2002, he was instantly thrown into a feud with his wife Stephanie McMahon. Due to the game now being a babyface and McMahon still being a dastardly heel, WWE found it fitting that the two would grow apart, and it wasn't before long that McMahon tried to manipulate and gaslight Triple H. In one segment on Raw, it looked like Triple H was finally going to hit a pedigree on McMahon, and during the segment, the game would grab McMahon by her trousers, and this exposed her rear end for a brief second. The crowd came unglued when the spot occurred, and WWE didn't exactly hide it. The infamous pedigree. Speaking of the feud between Stephanie McMahon and Triple H, on an episode of Raw, the game had had enough of her antics, so he was going to pedigree McMahon through the announce table. Whilst the move never happened due to interference, McMahon suffered a major malfunction, and the malfunction was so severe that during an interview with Joe DeFranco, McMahon would label the incident as the most embarrassing moment of her career.
Oh no.
That would be when I had a wardrobe malfunction. Yeah, so there was my husband again. We were on top of the announce table, I think, and he went to put me in the pedigree, and I was wearing something that was apparently too low cut, even though I was taped in. And so in the pedigree, you're bent over and both arms are tied behind your back, and now I'm looking at my own that are exposed, and my arms are pinned behind my back, so there's absolutely nothing I can do except stare at myself and think about how mortified I was in that given moment.
Shit.
Stephanie receives a stink face. One of Stephanie McMahon's best traits was that she was always willing to do whatever it took to get the segment over. In 2001, in one of the most shocking moments of the year, McMahon was actually hit with a stink face from Rikishi. McMahon sold the stink face incredibly well, as she looked like she was about to vomit. According to WWE Hall of Famer Rikishi, he was informed that he was going to deliver the stink face to McMahon moments before he walked out of Gorilla. This meant that Rikishi didn't prepare for the segment, so let's hope he just didn't take a bathroom visit just before he would stick his backside in the $1 billion princess's face. Stephanie gets ripped by Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho's babyface act between 2000 to 2001 was insanely over, and one of the reasons as to why was because of Jericho's verbal beatdowns of Stephanie McMahon. Jericho would often insult McMahon in promo segments, and most of the time we would reference McMahon in a manner that certainly pushed the boundaries of a TV-14 rating. One time on Raw in 2001, he referred to Rhino and McMahon as the gore and the whore, which was utterly hilarious. There was also the time during the Road to Jericho vs. Rhino at SummerSlam in 2001, where Jericho would state, "I'm going to take care of that smelly, greasy, nasty animal, and I'm going to get to you too, Rhino." Planet of the Pie.
So
Speaking of Chris Jericho always verbally bashing Stephanie McMahon, in one incredibly famous segment on Raw, Jericho tried to set up McMahon from a species from the hit movie The Planet of the Apes. Hilariously, the apes that came to the ring appeared to use a variation of Kamala's classic WWE theme, and the idea behind the ape appearance was to reference the 2001 remake of the popular franchise. According to Jericho himself, during a special WWE Network interview with McMahon, it was Vince McMahon who had the infatuation with apes, so this was the entire brainchild of Mr. McMahon. But if that wasn't embarrassing enough for McMahon, Jericho would then proceed to throw a cream pie right in her face. McMahon would always go the extra mile in segments with Jericho, and Jericho got away with basically degrading Vince McMahon's daughter on a weekly basis. Stephanie gets stripped by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stephanie McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin always had great chemistry in segments, and this segment in early 2001 was no exception. Austin would hilariously place a beer vending box around the neck of McMahon, and after Austin politely removed the box from McMahon's neck, it mysteriously pulled up McMahon's top, exposing her to the entire world. This received a nuclear reaction from the audience, and as always, McMahon sold the segment absolutely perfectly. Stephanie almost trips. Most of Stephanie McMahon's wildest and most embarrassing moments have been scripted. However, one segment on Raw in 2016 certainly wasn't. McMahon had a segment with her brother Shane McMahon, and as she was leaving the ring, she almost tripped over. It looked like McMahon's ankle landed awkwardly, and McMahon was able to walk it off casually. The camera hilariously cut to Shane McMahon, who pulled the funniest facial expression imaginable, and it added great humor to an embarrassing situation. The pudding match versus Vicky Guerrero. It was previously the case that wrestlers and non-wrestling talent would be embarrassed on the way out. Therefore, when it was reported that Vicky Guerrero was leaving WWE and our final segment was to be a pudding match of sorts against Stephanie McMahon, there was concern that WWE were going to stop at nothing to humiliate her. After Guerrero herself
God.
was thrown into the mud pit, Guerrero would grab McMahon and throw her right into the mud.
Oh
It was an
my
awesome moment, and to make things even better, WWE would play Eddie Guerrero's iconic theme song for her on the way out. McMahon was
Look at
covered
it.
head to toe in mud, and she clearly went out of her way to give Guerrero a send-off that fans would never forget.
Aw.
Speaking to Diva Dirt, this is
That's
what Guerrero
actually
had to say
perfect.
regarding working with Stephanie McMahon. You know, I work with Stephanie quite a bit. You know, with her being on the McMahon family panel when they would fire me from several occasions. I love Stephanie. She's such a powerful and empowering character, not only professionally, but in her personal
Yeah,
life.
she's
And so to
really
work with
awesome.
her just only made me better because I always wanted to give my 100% to her. Stephanie meets CM Punk. The CM Punk was the hottest act in WWE in the summer of 2011, and due to Punk having issues with Triple H, it made logical sense for him to interact with Stephanie McMahon on screen. Punk and McMahon would take part in an enjoyable backstage segment at the SummerSlam event, and when McMahon offered to shake hands with Punk, he politely declined before saying he knew where her hand had been.
Yep,
This was of
I know
course
that
a
one.
reference to the relationship between McMahon and Triple H. This was a moment that was filled with innuendo, and it was certainly a segment that pushed the PG guidelines, especially for the respective time period. Maybe I should marry one. Stephanie McMahon is one of the finest female talkers in WWE history, yet there was one name that could go toe-to-toe with McMahon on the microphone, and that was AJ Lee. In one famous promo segment between the two on Raw in 2013, AJ declared that she should start thinking more like McMahon, and instead of dating superstars, maybe she should commit to marrying one. There was some buzz and rumblings at the time that WWE were potentially going to look to book a McMahon vs AJ feud. Unfortunately, this never materialized. McMahon was stepping in the ring a year after this notable promo, but that was for a match with Brie Bella. Wrestling A-Train.
Okay.
During the infamous 2003 feud between Stephanie McMahon and her own father Vince McMahon, she'd been booked to wrestle A-Train on SmackDown. Whilst the match was eventually stopped thanks to interference by The Undertaker, at one stage it looked like McMahon was going to be hit with a deadly train wreck,
Oh my
and even though
God.
the move was never hit, McMahon looked utterly terrified whilst in the setup for the
Vince,
move,
just
and
give the
A-Train's hand
yes,
was in a
sir.
questionable position to say the very least. The feud between the father and daughter duo was an odd move for WWE to take in 2003, and it certainly isn't a storyline that fans look back on fondly. And covered in horse manure. One of Stephanie McMahon's first feuds in WWE was with Trish Stratus. The two were basically competing for the affection of Vince McMahon, and whilst the feud was completely wild, it did result in huge ratings for WWE, and both women did an excellent job with the feud. Some cite the feud as Stratus' breakthrough moment in WWE, as it was the first time that the crowd had reacted to her in a meaningful way, and coming out of the feud, Stratus was without a doubt one of the most over female acts in the entire company. During the feud, McMahon would do anything she
probably
could
like
to get
Pamela
Stratus
Anderson
over,
in WWE.
and on an episode of SmackDown in 2001, she allowed Stratus to give her a beatdown and put her face in horse manure. McMahon sold this
my
as she always did to
God.
perfection, and
Oh
dry
my
heaving certainly
God.
added an element of gross-out humor to the segment. This was no doubt the mastermind of Vince McMahon, who often had a questionable sense of humor, and he was prone to including his own daughter in his own comedic fantasies. But there you have it, folks. Stephanie McMahon's
Dude,
most
she is
embarrassing moments
so
in
awesome.
WWE fantasies.
Like, when I was younger in my career, I was all on board to do whatever Vince McMahon, her father, wanted. I look back on some of the stuff I did and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sometimes Vince had weird ideas. I thought it was a little bit weird, but it was a different time in our business. Yeah, like for that time, probably is not as weird as it is now when we are watching and reflecting on those moments in today's age and time. Back then that was the humor. Like if you watch comedies, a lot of times they had the same type of humor where like the more gross the humor is, the funnier it is. But also like comedies back then were so much better. Am I the only one? Yeah, I think so. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think that Stephanie McMahon is so awesome. Yeah, she wasn't an actual wrestler, but she gave to the wrestling community so much more, and she truly worked her ass off for the company, and she deserves to actually be influenced in the like to influence the company today and have a saying in it, even though her dad is a whole other thing. Yeah, I'm happy that the company is in her hand and Triple H hand. They are actually really cool.